Rev up your engines!
Did you notice gas prices are surging again? I noticed the other day here in Tennessee, they were $2 and something, and now they're going up to $3.40. Let me tell you, it's the usual BS from the oil companies, right? It's supposed to be supply and demand, right? It's winter. You know what happens in winter? Demand's down, and the demand is not. But now they're saying, well, we're having problems with our oil refineries. They're not refining enough, so we're going to raise the price. It's like, wait a second. I always thought a company should be able to do their job and sell the stuff. We can't make as much, so we're going to charge more? What kind of an excuse is that? That just basically shows you that it's a monopoly. They all get together and they all raise prices the same, drop prices the same. It's hilarious because supposedly they're independent companies that don't talk to each other, right? Now, they don't all have problems with their refineries, right? But they all jack the price up. Now, in the last month, the leaders are Colorado, Georgia, and Delaware. Colorado's been 98 cents a gallon more. Georgia at 70 cents, and Delaware at 62 cents. And I find that absolutely hilarious because they come up with any excuse they can, right? Well, I recently went to the desert in Utah, Moab. It's beautiful there. You ever want to have a great vacation and see the real Western world, go to Moab and drive around all the national parks there, right? Well, I noticed. I said, this is weird. Gasoline was like $1 more a gallon in Colorado than it was in Utah, and they're bordering states, right? And they had some other excuse then about why. It wasn't that the refineries were down then. They just think of any excuse to raise the price to rip us off. That's just how the oil companies are. Let's face it, they have a monopoly. We can't get our own gasoline maker on. You got to buy them from them. And it's not like, well, one company has a problem. Well, how come all the companies raise their price? Obviously, there's collusion involved, right? And, of course, if you look at it historically, normally in the winter, there's less demand. People drive less. It's cold. They stay at home. And the price is supposed to drop. Instead, it's going up. So, they're just looking for any excuse to raise their prices. And then they give these BS rationale. Well, here's why. This is the economics behind it. Well, follow the money. Don't follow their BS excuses. Just like for a long time in the United States, interest rates are super low. Now they're coming up a little bit higher, right? But for over a decade, the interest rate for most people, money in the bank, was almost zero. And then they give all these excuses. The economy is blah, 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 right? Well, what it comes down to is all these corporations got to borrow money for almost nothing. It was just an easy way for them to get cheap money. And they can BS about the economic reasons behind it, but that's the real reason. Follow the real money, because they're making a lot of money off of your money, and they don't care. If they can get it for nothing, they'd be totally happy. And it's the same thing here. They're blaming it on refinery troubles, right? Hey, what the heck? It's their companies, their refineries. They're supposed to take care of us and make the things run right? Why do we have to pay a penalty because these idiots say, well, we're having problems with blah, blah, so we're going to raise the price? It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But of course, it goes on and on and on with their excuses, and then these people seem to accept it somehow. Well, that's the reason. No, that's not the reason. The reason is one thing, and that's greed. Well, the British are, of course, trying to turn everything into electric vehicles as fast as they can, are finding that the promises in reality don't match up. This week in England, it was revealed the English are going to miss their target of creating charging stations by 20 years. And the original promise was 300,000 new charges by 2030. Now they say it's going to be 2050, right? If everybody rushes out and buys electric cars in Great Britain, which they aren't, as a matter of fact, their sales are going down now. If they all did, there's going to be no place to charge the stupid things because they're charging infrastructure that's supposed to be really good with 300,000 charges by 2030. Now they said it's going to be 2050. They studied how many are actually being built and finding out that people aren't actually building that many of them. Let's face the facts. If you run a business and you are going to have a business charging cars, you got to see what's the profit margin, right? It costs a lot of money to build these things. They got to have the infrastructure. I've been to England, and let me tell you, their infrastructure is crumbling. They'd have to do their electrical infrastructure over too. They had rolling blackouts when it got too hot in the summer. They'd have to build up all kinds of stuff that they aren't presently building up, right? You can't just put chargers in. There's got to be strong enough wires to run them. But it turns out they're not even going to have the boxes ready in time. But the business people that would have to build these things, they want to make money. And here is the facts of electric cars. As it stands today, something like around 90% of the charging is done at home. So that means 10% of the charging is done on the road. What does that mean? These guys are going to have to put a whole bunch of money into building the charging stations, but they're only going to get 10% of the business. So, of course, it's not happening. They're actually not building them at the rate that the government claimed they would. And, of course, the UK says they're going to ban the sales of gas and petrol cars by 2030. The sale of new ones, not used ones. So even the English are hedging their bets there. And then the true English people come out. Here's a woman that runs a company where they rent electrical vehicles out to people for hospitality, for tourists and stuff. And she says, and I quote, "They say the range is 180 miles on our cars, but even on a good day, it's actually about 150, as long as you don't put on the heating, which drains it even faster." The range is a lot less than what they say, and these are new vehicles that these companies are leasing and then renting out to people, right? Imagine when they're 4 or 5 years old, they're not going to be in the less range. Everybody knows batteries drain over time, and then they don't last as long. They have a shorter lifespan, right, between charges. Everybody knows that, especially about lithium-ion batteries. So this massive future of electrification, even the English are realizing. I say it may not be happening as soon as we think it's going to happen. Yeah, if ever. Their infrastructure is in worse shape than ours in the United States. It's not going to magically appear, all these electric wires and charging stations. No way. Conservative 311, he says, Scotty got an '06 F-150, 187,000 miles. It struggles to shift into overdrive only after the first cold start. Otherwise, it shifts fine. What would cause it? Well, I can tell you what's causing it: old age. It's an '06, got 187,000 miles. Now, what you might want to try is, I did one a couple weeks ago, and it actually fixed it quite well. There is an additive called Lube Guard. Most auto parts sell it, right? Lube Guard is an additive to the transmissions to help them work better. Yours, obviously, when it's cold, it won't go into overdrive, but then later it does. There's valve bodies, there's all kinds of little holes the fluid flows through. When it's cold, first time they open, it might not work that well. You put the additives in, you might find after 200-300 miles of driving, it'll work fine. But if it doesn't, live with it. Because if eventually it doesn't go into overdrive, you're going to have to rebuild the thing. It's going to cost you a small fortune. But a lot of times at Lube Guard, if it's like 10 ounces, you drain 10 ounces out. You can suck it out through the drain hole and then put that in and drive it. 200-300 miles. I did that the other week on one, and it went back to normal. Robert Wessel says, I just replaced the water pump, etc. on my '01 Subaru. Today I saw coolant pooled in the bottom of the radiator. Hoses are good. Do I need a new radiator? You change the water pump. So, first thing you want to do, get yourself a garden hose all the radiator off, clean it off, and then check it in a few days. Coolant can stick there for a long time. From doing that water pump job, it might have just gotten there, right? Might have just gotten there, and I've seen that happen. You hose it off, then you know there's nothing there but water, and then if 2-3 days later you see coolant again, then it probably is your radiator. They're plastic radiators. The tanks, top and bottom, are plastic. The middle is aluminum, and they're built by machines that just clamp them on. They're clamped on. They're not welded, soldered, they're just clamped. And over time, the clamps are just worn. They get old. The plastic shrinks a little, cracks, and it'll leak on the seams. Then you need a new radiator. But it might just be residue from the job. Do exactly what I said, you'll find out. Legend says, what do you think about Honda V6 engines? Honda makes good V6 engines. There's only one problem. Some of them are stuck in the dinosaur ages. A lot of them still are using rubber timing belts. And they're interference engines. So if the belt breaks, pistons hit the valves, and then you got to spend thousands, or you throw the car and the engine away, right? Everybody else for decades have been using timing chains, but for some reason, many of the Honda engines, Odysseys, you name it, they're still using a V6 engine that has a rubber timing belt. They run perfectly fine, but that means like every 100,000 miles, you got to spend a whole bunch of money because they didn't make them with the timing chain. Timing chains cost more money to make, but in the long run, they last longer, and there's no maintenance involved to them other than changing the oil regularly. So that's the only weird thing about them. I don't know, I guess they just decided, well, we don't want to put chains. It's too much bother to change. Costs too much money. Where everybody else has switched over to change long time ago. Bilakis says, BMW are one of the best driving machines! Exclamation point. Well, I can agree there in terms of driving. They're fun to drive. A week or so ago, my grandson got this BMW 650. It's a convertible with a V8 engine in it and a 6-speed transmission. I made a video on it the other day, and it is fun to drive. It is fast. It handles. It's a screamer, right? The only problem is they're not any fun to fix and they break all the time, and if you keep them any length of time, all the plastic parts are super cheaply made, and they have so many plastic parts on the engine, transmission, the cooling system, make your head spin, they break. Plus, their technology is at a level of insanity. When I hook up my computers to it and show people, here's all the computer data from this car, here's how it all feeds back, and they're like, You kidding me? This is how my car works. I'm like, yes. They're extremely complex. The Germans go too far with technology because they can. We can make it. We're going to make it. But then when it comes time to repair it, it costs a small fortune. The parts cost a lot. The guys who work on them charge a small fortune. They are fun to drive. There's no arguing that. But, for example, I love driving them. Have I ever owned a BMW? No. And I won't either. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.